Quit India movement. The failure of the Cripps mission left no meeting ground between the Congress and the government. The government was not prepared to part with its power, while the Congress insisted on the immediate transfer of power to the Indians, because it believed that an effective resistance against the Japanese aggression could be organized only by a popular government. Gandhi, who was not prepared to oppose the government by a mass movement so far, was now convinced of the necessity of starting a mass movement again and, hence, changed his mind. Some congressmen were not convinced of his argument to start a mass movement, with a view to force the British to hand over power to India during the course of war. But all submitted before him, and those who did not, like C. Rajagopalachari and Vallabhbhai Desai, resigned from the Congress, July 1942. The Congress Working Committee met at Wota in July and demanded the immediate withdrawal of the British from India. The All India Congress Committee ratified this Quit India resolution at its meeting at Bombay on 8 August, 1942. Major causes for Quit India movement. The roots of the revolt of 1942 can be found in certain national as well as international developments. The first and the foremost cause was the new popular mood of August 1942 caused by the rout of the British by an Asian power, viz., Japan. The victory of Japan and subsequent events shattered the white prestige on the one hand and on the other revealed the gross racism of the rulers of India once again, while the defeat of the British made the Indians believe that British rule was ending. The way the British cared about the safety of their own people in Southeast Asia, leaving the Indian immigrants there to their own fate, caused great amount of anti-white fury among all the Indians. The British in Malaya, Singapore and Burma commanded all forms of transport in their ignominious flight, and left the Indian immigrants there to find their own way. The result was a compound of anti-white fury and an expectation that British rule was ending. It is probably not accidental that East UP, and West and North Bihar, the region where the August Rebellion, revolt of 1942, attained its maximum popular intensity, was also traditional one of the principal catchment areas for Indian migrant labor going to Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. Gandhi, in militant mood. This new popular mood of August 1942 was certainly sensed by Gandhi, and his own statements before launching the Quit India movement are proof of this fact. That is why the summer of 1942 found Gandhi in a strange and uniquely militant mood. Leave India to God or to anarchy, he repeatedly urged the British. This orderly disciplined anarchy should go, and if as a result there is complete lawlessness, I would risk it. Though the need for non-violence was always reiterated, the famous Quit India resolution followed up its call for mass struggle on non-violent lines, under Gandhi's leadership, with the significant rider that if the Congress leadership was removed by arrest, every Indian who desired freedom and strives for it must be his own guide. Gandhi also declared in his passionate Do or Die speech that every Indian should consider himself to be a free man, and also that mere jail-going would not do. If a general strike becomes a dire necessity, I shall not flinch, was yet another most uncharacteristic remark made by Gandhi in an interview on 6 August, 1942. It may be noted that Gandhi was, for once, prepared to countenance political strikes precisely at a time when the communists were bound to keep aloof from them, in very sharp contrast to his attitude in previous of left-led labor militancy in 1928-29 or the late 1930s and early 1940s. How was Quit India movement organized? Three broad phases can be distinguished in the Quit India movement or the revolt of 1942. The first phase, from 9th to 15th of August 1942, was massive and violent but quickly suppressed. It was predominantly urban and included hartals, strikes and clashes with police and army in most cities. Bombay, as so often before, was the main storm center during this phase. Calcutta also witnessed many hartals. There were violent dashes with heavy casualties in Delhi and, in Patna, control over the city was virtually lost for 2 days. After a famous confrontation in front of the Secretariat on 11th August, the violence of Delhi was largely due to mill hands on strike, and strikes by mill workers were also reported in Lucknow, Kanpur, Bombay, Nagpur, and Ahmedabad. The Tata Steel plant was totally closed down for 13 days in a strike in which the sole labor slogan was that they would not resume work until a national government had been formed. At Ahmedabad, the textile strike which began during this period lasted for 3 months, and a nationalist chronicle later described the city as the Stalingrad of India. The urban middle class was extremely prominent in this first phase, spearheaded by students. From the beginning of the second phase, from 15th August to 30th of September 1942, the focus shifted to the countryside, with militant students fanning out from centers like Banaras, Patna, and Cuttack, destroying communications on a massive scale and leading a veritable peasants' rebellion against white authority, strongly reminiscent in some ways of the revolt of 1857. Northern and western Bihar and eastern UP, Midnapur in Bengal, and pockets in Maharashtra, Karnataka and Orissa were the major centers of this second phase, which saw the installation of a number of local national governments, which, however, were usually short-lived. Weakened by the brutal repression, no less than 57 army battalions were used. The movement, from about the beginning of October 1942, entered its longest but also the least formidable phase, that is, the third and final phase. This phase was characterized by terrorist activity by educated youth directed against communications, police and army installations, occasionally rising to the level of guerrilla war, such as the one along the North Bihar-Nepal border led by Jayaprakash Narayana. Part-time peasant squads engaged in farming by day and sabotage activities by night, and in some pockets, secret parallel national government function, most notably at Tamiluk in Midnapur, Sitara in Maharashtra and Talcher in Orissa. Extremely impressive and heroic by any standards, such activities, however, were no longer a threat either to the British rule or to the war plans of the Allies. Response of different classes towards Quit India movement. An examination of the social composition of the movement reveals the role of different social groups and classes in it. Unlike in the civil disobedience days, students, belonging to the middle class, were very much in the forefront in 1942. Whether in urban clashes as organizers of sabotage, or inspirers of the peasant rebellions, What made the August movements formidable, however, was a massive upsurge of the peasantry in certain areas. But as the one available attempt at statistical analysis of the crowd in the East UP and West Bihar regions indicates, the revolt of 1942 was essentially an upsurge of peasant smallholders, and hence far from being a movement of habitual criminals or ruthless hooligans. The role of the laborers was somewhat short-lived. The mill element, participation by mill workers, in general was dropping out by August the 14th to the 15th. The industrial belts of Calcutta and Bombay were largely quiet, probably because of the communist opposition to the movement. Labor participation in the movement was, however, considerable in some centers like Jamshedpur, Ahmedabad, Ahmednagar, and Pune, where there had been little communist activity and where Gandhian influences had contributed to cordial relations between labor and capital. No detailed study has been made so far of the extent of business participation, but it seems to have been considerable, at least in the city of Bombay. Stories are, in fact, current about considerable covert upper class and even Indian high official support to secret nationalist activities in to set up a fairly effective illegal apparatus, including even a secret radio station under U. Sharmada for 3 months in Bombay. Impact of the movement. The British realized that it would be wiser to try for negotiated settlement rather than risk another confrontation as massive and violent as the revolt of 1942. It is true that by the end of 1942 the British had come out victorious in their immediate total confrontation with Indian nationalism and the remaining 2 years of the war in the country. Yet, the victory was ambiguous and with several limitations, and was possible only because war conditions had allowed really ruthless use of force. Negotiations became necessity. The British were not prepared to risk such a confrontation again, and that the decision in 1945 to try for a negotiated settlement was not just a gift of the new Labour government, is indicated by the attitude of Lord Wavell. In a letter to Churchill dated 24th of October 1944, Wavell pointed out that it would be impossible to hold India by force after the war, given the likely state of world opinion and British popular or even army attitudes, as well as the economic exhaustion of Britain. Hence, he felt that it would be wise to start negotiations. Thus, it is amply clear that the decision of negotiated transfer of power taken in 1945 was not just a gift of the new Labour government. Rather, it was primarily the result of the above realization.